Selamünaleyküm. Nihal Hocam, Yılmaz Bey, hoş geldiniz. Nihal Hocam, YouTube'u başlatabilecek misiniz? Biraz erken başlamış. İsterseniz birazdan canlı yayın başladığında mı başlatsak? Çünkü bu şekliyle mi yayınlayacağız? Peki.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد. Kıymetli misafirler, dear our guests, we have a distinguished keynote speaker today regarding the field of chaplaincy, inshallah. Also, I have one more moderator to help asking proper questions and getting more knowledge, wisdom, experience, and horizon from our guest. I think Brother Jawad Bayat is available to turn on his camera. Yes. Welcome, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Welcome, Sister Sekina.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome, Chaplain Imam Jawad. Thank you for joining Respect students today, and to Chaplain Owner for organizing this important topic and discussion in this time of continued turmoil and crisis and everything else that our community is going through. Jazakallah khair.
Yes, during the world is getting crazy, and we are receiving negative data, news from all around the world, and important to talk about the chaplaincy provides spiritual care, moral values, and some supports to needy people, whoever needs in the humanitarian crisis environment or natural disasters, whatever they faced as a problem, they need some supports. And Chaplain Jawad Bayat, he is an educator, certified educator of ACPE and supervisor. He will help us to give that message, most important messages from the chaplaincy field. How can we provide support them? And as the chaplains and candidates of chaplains, as clerks, teachers, journalists from all around the different professions, how can we be prepared to support them? So, Chaplain Jawad, first of all, we would like to introduce you. Then you can start the talk. If you want to say before my introduction, please go ahead and greet the people.
Well, it's an honor to be here and to see how I can be of service. But I'll let you do your thing. I'm here as a servant, so let us continue, inshallah.
Okay, brother. Jawad Bayat is a passionate ACP certified educator, spiritual care provider and leader, Muslim chaplain, CP spiritual theory developer, interreligious communicator, and educational facilitator. He is a graduate of the Islamic chaplaincy program at Hartford International University. He was my early classmate, let's say. So he completed his 4 ACP level 1 and 2 units at Overlook and Morristown Medical Center and completed the multi-year ACP educator certification at the Cleveland Clinic main campus. Additionally, Jawad is working on his Doctor of Missionary in Professional Education and Leadership degree at Ecumenical Theological Seminary. The focus of Jawad's doctoral dissertation is the creation of an original CP transformational learning theory from a spiritually integrated Islamic lens. Its presentation is forthcoming. He served as an associate director for CP at Penn Medicine, Princeton House, Behavioral Health, where he integrated behavioral health chaplaincy into the CP learning, supervised diverse learners, including Muslim CP students, innovated spirituality groups, and led with relational and transformational education. Jawad is the author of the chapter, The Jihad of Self-Realization and Human Growth in CP, in the Mantle of Mercy, Islamic Chaplaincy in North America. Yes, welcome again.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Alhamdulillah. Perhaps we could maybe have this as like a dialogue, and you ask whatever, you know, that's really pressing, or questions, whether you would like to know anything about my own journey or any other explorations, and we can move forward in that way as well. I hope that would be a lot more interesting, at least for me too, and maybe the participants here.
The importance of chaplaincy is a tensioned world, our title today. So everybody needs, in some part of their life, chaplaincy support from their classmates or colleagues, from their relatives, but they can't provide this support because of lack of knowledge. So you are trying to provide education under the CPE units, clinical pastoral education. So why, first of all, let me ask, why you choose this service type to the human being? What was your motivation? How did you start to walk on that journey?
I mean, that's the real question. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, that is the key question, I think. You know, your motivation, my motivation. If we don't know our motivations, you know, for our ministry, for our acts of service, often we can be, you know, swayed by, you know, like the wind, you know, like a feather in the wind in a way. And sometimes it's okay. But oftentimes, if we live our life this way, we can feel somewhat aimless. Although, yeah, it is a balance. So I'll say that on the whole, my journey began, I'll talk about some like social location. You know, I live in New Jersey. My family were refugees from Afghanistan. They came here during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1981. And they arrived here in September, just a few months ago, you know, like September 1981. And I wasn't born yet. My grandfather was killed by the Soviets during that time. May he rest in peace. And you know, there is some of that trauma that's in our background related to why they sought refuge here. And in being here and them trying to make a new life, you know, my dad was a pharmacist, and my mom was starting to work as like a school teacher. You know, they were starting to build their lives. My sisters were like 5 and like 5 and 1 at that time. Yeah, they were a really young family, kind of like me. You know, they're just, imagine, you know, you described me all the ways that you just described, right? And all of a sudden, khalas, you know, I have to leave the country because my priority is what? My family. And they leave, and they eventually, alhamdulillah, you know, they get here. If it wasn't for them fleeing here, I wouldn't have been born, what it comes down to. And so I'm mindful of the trials and tribulations my family had endured, and also what that meant on their emotional and spiritual inner landscape, like to be able to flee from such tragedies, just like what's going on in the world today. It has a real impact on how we feel as people, and then how our motivations come forth from that. And so I was born a little bit later after they came here, and um, so I would say I'm an Afghan American, Muslim. And I didn't really understand that identity really until maybe after I graduated from high school. And it's very common, when people go to college for the first times, they have these awakenings because they're all of a sudden introduced to these new ideas from like hundreds of people. It's not just one town. And our brains are developing at a more rapid pace. And the pressure of what's going to come next is coming, right? Because you're in college and all that. So I followed that typical kind of trajectory. My sisters had also gone to college as well, alhamdulillah, and that also gave me some of the courage to go too. Some people don't, but so we had a tradition of higher education in our family. And I because of what I just described to you, I guess you could say for a long period of time I just couldn't make sense of I went to Islamic school and attended the mosque very regularly, um, from as young as I can remember. My dad would take me to Salat al-Jummah very regularly, and it was part of my DNA, because we went to a mosque that was in Paterson, New Jersey, that was primarily Afghans, and so I grew up speaking Farsi, and so it was almost like mini Afghanistan, this mosque. Many of our mosques are like this. There's like mini Turkey or mini, whatever it is. And so it felt very much like that. I got some cultural enrichment from this. But part of it was also, how do I make sense of who I am amidst all this diversity? And I really did struggle. In until during this period of time, up until I was about 19, and I kept trying to find ways to satisfy this void that was in my heart. I was searching for more. I couldn't understand how. This is me looking back today, right? So I'm not using these words back then. I'm using these words today, understanding what's happening then, which is part of the work of chaplaincy and the work of clinical pastoral education and theology and all that. So it helps us reintegrate some of those things and try to make sense of it. And so when I'm looking back now, at that time, I have this void in my heart, something that's missing, and I keep trying to fill it. And I had all this mosque related activities that were going, but most of it was very ritually oriented. We were very much about, just go ahead, make salat, just go, just do it, yeah. And it was just very transactional. Let's just say it was a transactional spirituality. What is it? Pretty much, and I think many Muslims struggle with this. It was that Imam Ali says something to the effect of, you know, you can either be, if you worship Allah out of fear, you're Allah's slave. If you worship Allah out of rewards, you're a merchant. And if you worship Allah out of love, you're a free man. And that, I felt like we were merchants in my family and in our religious community. You do this, you get thawab. You do this, you get this. There wasn't the sense of like love that was there. It was like it was transactional. That's how I'm gonna say, or fear-based. And there might have been some gems of out of love that was there. And it was, those folks had always been I was always drawn to them, but I couldn't understand why, that they would do things, but not for the sake of getting something that was material, in a way. But they're not working professionally, right? They were just living as a mu'min, so to speak, not just a Muslim, but as a mu'min. And they would go about their day-to-day job. And so, but I'm in this space and just trying to fill this void, and I get part of the American scene, whatever you imagine that's on the TVs, I'm very much trying to like make a sense, trying to find a sense of belonging. And I go wherever it is, trying to find some solace, some peace. And I kept struggling. It just wasn't working. I did it, and I got the short-term relief, but next thing you know, I'm just still searching for some solace, some peace. And I remember sitting in my dad, he's not a pharmacist any longer, although he had his training. He was a restaurant owner, and I would help him on the weekends. I was in the kitchen, and some of the greatest wisdom we find is just in the mundane. Is just in That's where for me Allah is. Allah exists in the in not only in like very big times, but also just in very simple moments. I was sitting there with um the chef, and we were just sitting there, and he just said, Jawad, Bishi Injo, come sit down. And I don't know what he noticed, but he must have noticed that I was a bit sad or down, we could say, because I was trying to reconcile some of my relationships, and it just wasn't working the way I wanted it to. I was trying to control things. It wasn't working. That was what was going on in my head, but he didn't know this. But he noticed because he knew me from as I was a young child, for me to sit down, and he saw me, and he had me sit, and he just repeated some of the same things he used to say, but this time he was crying, he was tearing down, or maybe his eyes were watery, and he had this joy in his face. And for me, I'm just thinking about all these struggles I have in the Jewish tradition. I think they say something about how, you lay the blessings of God on the heart, not inside the heart, because when the heart breaks open, then it goes in. And so this is what seemed to have been happening. And he said to me, Jawad, if you pray, if you make salah, if you commit your life to God, and he's not telling me go be a chaplain, he's not telling me go be some sheikh, go overseas and go get ijazah to go teach, hadith studies or something. He's not saying this. He's saying something much more deeper, I think. And he says, if you give, to yourself to Allah, Allah will give you good in this world, and will give you good in the hereafter, and He'll protect you from the hellfire. And I didn't know this at the time, but he's reciting a verse from the Quran, right? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhaban nar. Right? That's what he was saying. And he was saying this, and I'm like, really? Like, for all this time, I had gone to the mosque, all that stuff, but he's now saying it with some real sincerity of heart, some ikhlas. And I realized that I've given everything a shot. I really had, um, in a way, so long as it wasn't illegal. I'd given many things a shot that it wasn't illegal, to try to find some peace. And I realized at that moment that I hadn't given Allah a try. I haven't surrendered. And so a lot of the story goes back to these foundational moments. And so I left the moment there, and I was like, I still knew how to make salah, because all that time I was going to the masjid, all my family, it's like a family place. So I knew how to pray. And at this time, that's when I made, it was a taslim. That's when I surrendered, and I actually made I feel like at that moment is when I became Muslim, even though I was born Muslim. And so that's when I understood myself as someone who's constantly trying to be Muslim. We should be thankful to be able to call ourselves Muslim, to be Muslim, not just we are Muslim. We're always trying. It's a jihad to be Muslim, to surrender and trying to affirm Allah's will. And it was at that moment that I recognized that in my heart. And so, interestingly, because it was still transactional, my mom, my mom, my mom, I was praying upstairs in my room, and she opened the door the next day, and she saw me making salah, and And she opened the door and then she closed it and then she opened it again and she was like, my son is making salah. And when I came downstairs, she gave me $20 and I was like, oh, this is great. So there is some material rewards too in this. Alhamdulillah. But that's just the way it is. Our parents do the best they can with the tools they have. And they
She wasn't expect that from.
no, not at all.
Okay.
No. Remember, I'm going about my life. The next day, I make tawbah, really. I just turn my face back to Allah, but that's between me and Allah. And I didn't talk to my mom at this stage. I was 19. How would I have known, to process my thoughts, to process all that stuff? At this point, I had just made this kind of tawbah. I turned my face, and my mom was really surprised. And they were all very careful. Let's make sure we don't tell him to keep praying because he'll rebel, But it was really interesting, a period of my life. A lot of shift, a lot of learning, a lot of very deep learning was happening then. So that's part of it. And what I realized then was I was still in college and practicing my faith and spirituality. I noticed while I was in college in that first or second year, I was like, what is it that I can do that, because it was really transforming my life, just giving myself to Allah and not caring so much about what other people were thinking, in a way, we think of shirk, as being sometimes, like the shirk of actually worshiping idols, but really the shirk that I think most of us often suffer with is hidden shirk, which is worshiping, other people's attentions, other people's ideas, other people's, ways of being. And I was, looking backwards, I was worshiping, like this sense of just, I was giving other people, other things attention other than God, not realizing that those are the creations of God, right? It's really God Allah that I really need to be turning for my sufficient, for support, the true kind. And it's a very interesting one because to really understand hidden shirk, we have to really understand our internal landscape. We have to sit quietly. And we have to sometimes struggle with our assumptions and all those things to really understand the heart of what's happening. And I realized that I wanted to do the work of applied spirituality. So in my heart, I had some people in the community that were trying to get me to go overseas to study. But in my research, I noticed that if I were to go study there, it would be the hard sciences. It would be like, how do you say it? The words are exoteric. It's the things that are the things that I was searching for was of the heart. Go ahead.
I used to say the collectioner of the heart, also doctors of the heart, but this is not literally,
Exactly. I was looking for something like that, not the heart, not the other kinds of learning that is more, like 50 things or just I'm trying to, the word is going to come to me later. I'll say it. But I knew if I was to go there, number one, it wasn't really what I was searching for. I was looking for spiritual, kind of Islamic spiritual kind of experiences. And this is not what was going to happen necessarily. And I also knew that practically being 21, 19, 20, 21, 19 to 22, practically, I'm like, I was also in conversations with, a prospective, my current wife, right? Alhamdulillah, I was I was courting her. And so this is also in my head, like, I need to provide financial stability, and to be real, there's not a lot of financial stability in being your traditional imam for a mosque. If you're trying to support, you probably have to have another job, and it's a real shame that our mosques don't do more to provide full-time salaries and benefits to them. And it's hard, and it's also a reflection of how challenging it is for the community itself, because some of them are struggling too. So it's a parallel process. So my compassion is there, but realizing my circumstance, I'm like, that's going to be the challenge. So I said, okay, Khair, I'll put it on the side, but let me just keep doing my work. My niyyah is there. Allah knows my intention, that I want to serve God and as God's instrument in this world. But let me see in time if something happens, that I can always go back if I need to. And then I learned from a radio. It was on the NPR, a National Public Radio segment, and Dr. Ingrid Mattson was not necessarily talking about the Islamic chaplaincy program, but the interviewer, Krista Tippett, just said that she's the director of the Islamic chaplaincy program at Hartford Seminary, now Hartford International University. And I was like, that's an interesting word. What does that mean? So I just searched it up, and I was like, okay, it requires a bachelor's degree first, and I still needed to get my bachelor's. So I was working on that, and I was like, I'm going to put this on the side. And so that's what it was. That's how I learned about it. That's how I learned that finally there is a form of service, of khidmah, that could perhaps not only help my family, but helps me work institutionally to give to be able to bring this work of service, this passion there. And I went about my process. I have a teaching degree. And after a year after I graduated of doing that, I was in this discernment period, and I interviewed with two places. No, I interviewed with that one place, and I did some site visits for some educational master's degree programs. And it was almost like a process of istikhara, it was almost like a process of that. But one of my teachers once said that before you open up the Quran and do that, make sure you do mashwara, ask people first. And then if you can't do it, then you go do this. He said, some of us, we just go to do istikhara right away. No, we need to have a process of doing it so that you can really feel like it really mattered at that point. So some of that was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enrolled in the Islamic chaplaincy program, and then the rest is kind of history. It was a really transformative time there, and I realized that I found, at least for now, my path. I will always, I think, inshallah, see myself as a servant to God and see however I can be of service. But for now, this is really the thing. So I thought and then at the time, I did not realize there was also ACP certified educator. I didn't realize there was spiritual care education. There was something like this at the time when I enrolled. So I just kept doing the thing. I did university chaplaincy. I kind of liked it, but I was like, there's not a lot of opportunity. So let's just see. I did CPE. And then in the Mantle of Mercy in the book, I talk about the experience there in the last few pages to give insight into the process that helped me discover the promise of this work. And there I just kept networking, and I kept connecting with people. And these are people who are from diverse backgrounds. Again, there was not that many Muslims. You mentioned there's 3. At the time, there was, in 2015, I think there was only one. There was one beforehand, but he didn't have a lot of public. He didn't really publicize, and I couldn't find too much public, too much media spotlights. His name was Imam Talabuddin Ansari. I don't believe he's active anymore. And so the other 3 at the time, the other 2, one of them was in process, and Tahara was the first one. But these weren't the people necessarily that brought me there. I only learned about them a little later on. I just knew that being one of the few Muslims, my connections were the people in my program. It was the rabbi there. It was the priest. It was these chaplains that were telling me, oh, you have real promise for it. I don't know of a position, but I think there's a real promise here. Let's just stay in touch. And I knew I had to finish my residency, and you said it, Overlook in Morristown is where I went. It just, the passion was how I just led with. And so that led to different people, different connections. And it led me to the Association of Muslim Chaplains Conference in 2017. And I met my future employer there. And at the time, I didn't know. We were just having a conversation about this because I was trying to understand if this is the right thing to do. I was working for a state hospital. I was in a union. I had really good privileges. I didn't need to leave it. Any of y'all who work in the state or federal government know it's a very cushion job. You can't get fired really, and you get really good benefits, and you get really good salary, lot of security. And I was also really young. I wanted also some challenge too, but I knew I had a good job, and it was hard to leave something like that for this uncertainty. Anyways, so that led to the conversation with my future employer, and I told her just what I just told you, and she was like, "Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, yeah, yeah," and so on, like this. And then she left, and 3 months later, she had found my number, called me, and said, "I want to recruit you to be to be the first Muslim chaplain at the Cleveland Clinic, and to be one of our first Muslim ever CECs. Would you be open to it?" And I told you how big family is for me, and I said, you know how much by now it was really hard for me to find this. But what do you think I said? Take a guess.
So not just me, our guests are your colleagues, and the candidates or colleagues are
Yeah,
here.
yeah. No, so when I say you, I say, what do you guys think I said to her?
Yes.
What do you think? Take a guess.
Yılmaz Hoca, what do you say?
What did I say? So I told her I have to wait. I have to talk to my wife. So I said she is in the midst of finishing her bachelor's program. She's in the midst of getting enrolled in the bachelor's program. I've waited for this opportunity, but my family is also very important here. And I went and I told her that my wife, I have my bachelor's degree, I have my master's degree, I have my 4 units of CPE, I work at a state job, I'm endorsed, alhamdulillah. But my wife, she just got enrolled into a nursing program for the first time, and she's been waiting to do this. I have to give her priority. So let me talk to her and see what happens. And so I called my wife, really excited, but just not wanting to, put that pressure on her too much, that burden of it. And she said, well, let's just see what program is there in Cleveland, and let's just see what happens. Let's just see. And she said, I didn't start yet. So if there's a place that can take me, we'll do it and we'll go. And you get what you need, and I'll get what I need. And that's what happened. And 2 weeks later, she got accepted into a nursing program there. And I called back the employer and I said, I'm ready for the interview. And so that's what happened. And then I started that summer, and we moved there, and she started in September. And that's when the training started, and it was life-changing. And it was a real blessing also to serve the Muslim community there. We would do Jummah twice on Fridays because the musalla was pretty big, but it was not big enough. We had like 200 people coming to pray every week. And so there was, and then I created the Ziyaratul Marid services while we were there. And I recruited some folks from some Muslims from the local mosques to come help that. And so I was leading this service. And I was doing the clinical chaplaincy too. But most importantly for me and my trajectory, it was the training. And so I finished there in 3 years and 4 months. And then I was still thinking about my family and my parents as they're aging. And there was an opening in New Jersey. And so in one way, all jobs are, you know, every institution. So it's interesting. Some of my reflections have been that, you know, as chaplains, we work in institutions, and it's kind of like being in the house of Firaun. You know, we are like Yusuf, you know, alayhi salam, working in the house of Firaun. You know, all these institutions, you know, they have their own requirements and all these things, and they also answer to something different. It's usually not God, you know, but they hire us because we need to also do that, and sometimes they're also gracious, you know, and as in his story, they show that too. And you know, so all jobs for me, you know, they serve a purpose, and mostly it's because in these institutions, Muslims are there, Christians are there, Jews are there. And interestingly, a lot of the research that's coming out, and I don't think this is the case for Muslims or religious minorities in America, but probably Christians, that there are less people going to churches now. But I do think that it's a little different for Muslims and Hindus and Jews, that they're still very active in the religious life. But altogether in institutional life, that's actually where religion is actually really high. And I think the institutions are paying notice to this. And so chaplaincy as a form of spiritual care that's institutionalized in the universities and in the healthcare institutions, the military, um, you know, the prison systems, the fireplace, the fire station was in the police, you know, all of these different institutional places, you know, this is where it's growing. There's a lot of need there. On the whole, while religious kind of institutionalized spirituality, people are not seeing it as trendy, there is a big need, and that there's a big gap in terms of meaning making and spiritual needs and concerns that are rather high, and I think is growing. And people aren't getting them met typically, and that majority Christians, I think, and especially maybe in particular areas of the country, maybe the East Coast, maybe the West Coast, maybe some parts of the Midwest, you know, in their traditional spaces, they're getting it met in institutions. And then now you see everyone's putting a lot of emphasis on institutions to relieve them of their power, relieve them of their suffering. You know, they say institution do this, institution do that. It's so fascinating. Just looking at it from a spiritual perspective, that we put a lot of hope in our institutions, not realizing that these institutions are just people like us, and we're just creatures of God as well. You know, so it's really something, you know, that, you know, I wherever we work, it's a transient place, and this is all just a transient life. um and my life, my parents' experience showed me that, to give me some humility about that nothing lasts forever. You know, you create something, and something, you know, it's to live is to die. You know, Allah's names are, the first and the last, right? Like, it's just, and so some of our lives kind of, I think, show that. That's kind of like the experience of what brought me to chaplaincy, but more so to certified educator training, because I wanted to be able to, in having some of this, how do you say it? Like, harnessed, having it extracting from my journey and my experience. I'm thinking to myself, wait, I might actually have an opportunity here to be able to give back as an educator, as a supervisor. And when people learn with me, they're not necessarily learning, they're going to be learning content, but for me, the process is content. We don't, the process of understanding, the process of feeling our feelings and what it's like to feel. When you're with your patients, if you can't tolerate discomfort, you have no business being there. If you can't tolerate your powerlessness, you have no business being there. You're going to do a lot of harm. You asked me what my motivation was. If we don't understand our motivation, we're going to be transacting our motivation onto them. That unconsciously we can sometimes place a lot of pressure for these patients, these care recipients, to satisfy our sense of meaning in this world. That's not their job. That's none of theirs. It's where, and so like that's partly the motivation, in part is to help us uncover what our motivation is and to be able to articulate that and to see the impact it has on our lives. And when you do this and we really understand the different textures there, you can only imagine in your body how much appreciation we're going to have for the people we're listening to their stories for. You're going to have these open-ended questions that are going to really resonate from your heart. You can really actively listen, and you can even challenge compassionately. But you can't really do that unless you do that with yourself.
These are so sensitive and technique information for the outsiders. I mean, if they are not from the field, not easy to cover all the things what you say.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Tuba. Brother Jawad, I cannot open my camera right now. Thank you so much for taking time to help us grow more and sharing your experiences and insights. So I have a quick question about the process of, after process of finding a position or finding a supervisor in education. How do you say that? That's what I'm interested in at this point in my life, and I am wondering how come a person can find such opportunities to become a supervisor after getting their chaplaincy degree, this and that. That's my question. Thank you.
Sister Tuba, I am wondering the same thing. I am at the same position with you. However, this is the ultimate, the final stage of our conversation. Let's talk about the CP
Sure.
first, CP unit, Clinical Pastoral Education, and what kind of profit, benefits, and advantages our friends can get from the CP if they participate that education. What is the difference between CP and the academic journey? Can you mention about them? But don't forget Sister Tuba's question, please.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Brother Honor, thank you for reminding me that this is, of course, we will follow the steps, and first maybe it's important to mention those steps later on, maybe if we have time. I don't want to shift the title of the topic. Thank you.
Thank you for
Title
understanding.
of the conversation, yeah.
Please don't. Please make sure I don't forget.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. So remind me if I don't. Wait. So part of this is for me. It goes back to. Let me read you something. So I go back to Maulana Rumi. He says this, okay? So this is your question. You said academic versus CPE learning, okay? And this is part of my theories of education. There are two kinds of intelligence, he says. One acquired, as a child in school memorizes facts and concepts from books and from what the teacher says, collecting information from the traditional sciences as well as the new sciences. With such intelligence, you rise in the world. You get ranked behind or ahead of others in regard to your competence in retaining information. You stroll with this intelligence in and out of fields of knowledge, getting always more marks on your preserving tablets. And there's another kind of tablet, one already completed and preserved inside you, a spring overflowing its spring rock, a freshness in the scent of the chest. This other intelligence does not turn yellow or stagnant. It's fluid, and it doesn't move from outside to inside through the conduits of plumbing learning. The second knowing is a fountainhead from within you moving out. This is really what is, I think, catches one of like the stark distinctions in terms of characterization between like chaplaincy academic learning and chaplaincy through, or let's just say spiritual care academic learning and spiritual care CPE learning, is that when he's saying plumbing learning is like you get the plunger and you push it down. This is the learning that happens in academia. There's no real way to practice it. There's no real way to live into it. You're not challenged. You're just experiencing things in your brain. It's just in your brain, you're writing a paper. So it's not, how do you say it? Experiential. And then you have a kind of learning that is more fluid. And that's what clinical pastoral education learning is. And part of it is that it's based off of experiential learning. It's the action, reflection, action method of learning. For me, when I teach, I do give the content. We need content. You need something to stimulate our brains. You get readings, you get things. But now you're going to go be visiting patients. You're going to be visiting staff, families. You're going to be encountering your care recipients. And oftentimes it's around death and suffering and mental health crisis and substance abuse, issues, behavioral health circumstances. There's a lot of things. And then what happens? It activates something from your own history, your own life. And it's very immediate. It's not, oh, patient, let me just wait. Let me go read my book and I come back. Right? You're right there. There's a sense of immediacy in the here and now. And so actually we call them in CPE, your care recipients, as many of you may already know, living human documents. Just like you are, we all are living human documents. And that's what I think Maulana Rumi is saying, is that we actually have a lot of a lot of what we need inside of it. Of course, he's talking about the fitra, our inner instinctual impulse that's there. But a lot of this is already there. And so my role there as educator is to try to be aware of when this becomes activated in the learner, so we can leverage that to help the person realize something about themselves, and then sometimes experience healing in the process, but also see how they got in the way or help them in their way of providing care. And we do this through verbatims, we do this through sometimes IPR, individual supervision, maybe some papers that we write up that are experiential based. But that's the main thing, I think, is that you're actually in the here and now with the experience of the learning, rather than it being removed from it. You're in the context, you're not removed from the context. And you're there with an educator, you're there with peers, creating a kind of community of learners on the way. And it's pretty unique and it's pretty hard, to be honest. And I love CPE because I'm an educator, but every time I have a new cohort, I'm on the journey with my students too. So as they're suffering and learning, like, I'm revisiting my own suffering too. It's a real challenge. And that's why it's not for the faint of heart, people who take CPE or folks who are CPE educators. It's a real process. And that's why self-supervision for me, and it's also in the standards and the outcomes, but just as a practice, that's why as you take CPE, my eye is toward the students who are trying to encourage their self-supervision. But you don't just develop that right away. That's why there's 4 units typically. You work on your first, second, third, and fourth unit, and we're trying to develop the practice of self-supervision and being able to then know how and when to take consultation. And so the whole practice in the community of learners is knowing when to do shura, when to go and do consultation. You're not in this life alone. And some of our hidden shirk that I'm saying says that we need to have all the answers. If I show my vulnerability, I'm deficient. And that is not the way that I believe Allah intended our life to be.
Chaplain Jawad,
Oh,
I would like to mention about Sekine.
that's okay.
Speak. Yeah, go ahead, Sekine.
I just had to turn off because we're driving back. I love how you explained the process, Chaplain Jawad, and I wanted to add or just build on that. And you were starting to talk about the relationships also. The mode of CPE learning and education relies a lot on developing trust and having a strong relationship with your murabbi or your educator. and with your peers. And it's not that is itself the foundation of the learning, and that's also the place where the learning and the transformational growth can happen within those relationships of trust. And to me, it is a very Islamic model when I look back in our own prophetic traditions and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam traveled and lived with and spent time with companions. Yes, there was also bayan and large groups and in different kinds of sharing and learning and leadership. But a lot of the transformational growth happened within close relationship, within close contact with the companions and other companions, or Rasulullah and the companions. And so the model sometimes when people feel like, oh, CPE is so new to Islam or so new to the Muslim way of teaching, I really don't feel like that, to be honest. I really feel this is a prophetic model of learning and teaching and spiritual growth.
I appreciate you saying that. You know, the last point, I want to piggyback off of that, since you're piggybacking. We can just keep piggybacking if that's okay. But I think as human beings, we get so caught up sometimes in categories and language and saying, oh, CPE is not Islamic, this or that. This whole life is creation, right? The fact that we're still living, it's still being created. And CPE is it's like a process of learning. So the fact that the word CPE is there, that's me speaking in English, trying to give a label to something that happened within the social location of America. And so people are, when they say it's Islamic or not, to my understanding, it's like all this baggage is related to it. But at the end of the day, it's like we're trying to name and label things. And sometimes we get so caught up in names and labels, and we don't realize it, like in that story of Rumi and the elephant, it's like it's all this, it's the elephant. It's just that it feels different. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I appreciate you highlighting that. I think it's really on point.
We are colleagues with Sister Sekine at Respect Graduate School. She is a chaplain of the school. Also, we provide spiritual pastoral education, CPE, in our roof, under the roof. So, which means not literally with the name of the Respect Graduate School and CPSP. So we have one more portrait you can see on the screen. I want to mention about that gentleman. He was a businessman, actually, Brother Yilmaz. When he participated our clinical pastoral education, he made decision to change his life, his career, everything. So this is an important and impressive story. If you wanted to mention about himself a little bit, he had a restaurant, maybe still he has, but now he just take off his white shirt of the cooking cloth and put the white chaplain cloth on it. So how do you feel, Brother Yilmaz? Why did you leave money and get sake of God? What was your motivation?
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. I don't want to talk about myself. I don't know, it just happened. While you give me the microphone, I just asked my question. It's related to me, actually. Training on chaplain, CPE, or being a chaplain, I believe it requires lots of love, courage, vulnerability, commitment, and all those things. Then I think you need to bring from your birth something to being a chaplain. It's not the skill you can gain later. Am I right in this? It's like you cannot be a chaplain by training. You have to bring something. You have to born with it.
So there are two types of I believe, let me open the question and ask the Jawad. There are two types of ilm, knowledge. One from God, which is wahbi. One from the literal education, which is kasbi, iktisab. You will earn it. You will get it. The other one is a gift from God. He is mentioned. Yeah. So the person can be a chaplain without that kind of gift. Well, that's the question. To you, brother Jawad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because okay. Can a person be a chaplain without
the gift of God, which is has mercy, has compassion, understanding,
oh,
and
I mean, yeah, I mean, the whole process, I think, in becoming a chaplain, and we have to do islah. There has to be some reformation of the soul of the person. And so that's really the question for me. In the process of doing that, are they able to witness that gift? I don't you see, the question is challenging for me because I'm an educator. I teach. So I have to have hope that people can change. Otherwise, it's hard for me to do this work because I'm an educator and I have this hope that I'll try, I'll do my part, but
can we say everybody has potential and capacity? We
yes.
just work on it.
Yes. Yeah, and for some, they just can't do it. Like some people get into the CPE and they're just not able to complete it. And so maybe that's an indication of that. Like they have the potential there, you know, but some can't get through it. And there might be a different reason. Some people might be trauma based. Some people might just be that they realize that this is not what Allah had, that this is not their this is not their calling, even though they thought it was this, and using that terminology. Or some might say, you know, I did this, and you know, the signs tell me that this is not where I'm meant to be. Or, gosh, I just don't want to spend most of my time listening to people's stories. I don't have enough compassion in my heart. So, you know, they came into it thinking, you know, they need to do this for material stuff, and they thought this would be a good way to do it, but they realized they can't really live into that, right? All of that might be saying what you guys are saying. I'm just giving it a bit more detail to it. In terms of what I've seen in my role as an educator, there's a number of people who couldn't finish CPE with me, or with others. I have a lot of colleagues, and it's not unheard of that people can't complete it, and it's okay that they can. Everyone's got to do what's right for them. You know, they live one life, and they got to just figure it out. You know, everything is learning. They learn something by doing it, and they learn that it's not for them. Alhamdulillah.
Did you get your response, brother Yilmaz?
Yes, I get his opinion. Thank you very much for that.
So I have one more question to you, Yilmaz. Don't escape. So you were a businessman. Now you are a chaplain. You were in the restaurant. Now you are in the hospital. So how do you compare? What do you feel? Tell us some more.
Being business, doing business is easier than being a chaplain.
Wow. We try to encourage our people to come, and now
anyway, they will have to face with this reality, so I don't want to disappoint them. So
okay.
It's not easy job. That's what I asked that question. It's supposed to be natural. You can nurture everything, unfortunately. It's supposed to be in you. And
yeah,
currently I am working at the jail, not the hospital any longer.
Okay. Another step.
Yeah, I think brother, what you're saying is, I think it's accurate in a way. I think it's accurate in many ways. I don't think, you know, like you have like 5 siblings. How come only one of them choose, you know, like chaplaincy? There must be some kind of calling that's there. I think you're correct. I think what I was trying to give is that my reticence is to say that, like, It's kind of like, can people learn empathy? Like think about it from that question. Do you have to already have the seeds of empathy there, or does it have to be learned? And that's a really complicated question.
Yeah. Yes.
But I think you're right that like not everyone who does it it's the right fit for them.
So, what are the challenges you faced? I mean, business world has more challenges, as I know. I mean, every day you need to produce something, new ideas, and follow the market, everything. I mean, in chaplaincy field, if you have those features which we mentioned, and it is your calling. I mean, if you feel it is your calling, you will appreciate at the end of the day when you go to the bed. So, are you not happy?
The
You must.
question to me? Okay. In business world, I was living in my life. In chaplaincy, I am in somebody else's story. So I am not myself. I am not their act. I'm just a part of like the part of their life. I'm not the managing partner there. So different. I'm with them, not with myself.
So I will ask Brother Jawad. Chaplain Jawad, aren't there any kind of protection methods of that kind of feeling? Because we have our own life. We need to focus our life as well after work hours. I think we have some protection methods from the overload burden on our shoulders. How can we avoid of overthinking of our care receivers issues? We don't want to bring our job to home.
Yeah, I can give some of my thoughts on that. I welcome anyone else's because this is also from experience too, that so there's wisdom there. One answer I think from that I am aware of is, and I think it matters who the recipients of my answer is, right? And if we're talking about folks who are chaplains, right, or folks who are aspiring chaplains, we have some skills that hopefully CPE taught us. One of them is identifying our emotions. And when we identify our emotions, we can listen to them. What is our emotion saying? Secondly, we will bring them home. We can't fight that. The more you fight the feeling, the worse it will get. So the real question, and we try to pretend, and then we try to numb ourselves. We don't, that's been my experience from my many students that I've had over the years. So what I'm trying to say is we give ourselves compassion, that you say it's hard and it's there. And part of it is in just acknowledging it like this in the beginnings, like it was in my life, they were coming, like the emotional space of my care recipients were heavier. But in the process of allowing it over time, I was able to engage different practices like ritually. So for instance, as I started doing that and I stopped fighting it, because I was trying, people always say, oh, you got to do self-care, you got to do self-care, you got to have boundaries, you got to have boundaries. But no one's really trying to help help us understand, what does that really look like though? Like, can we really talk about what it actually looks like when you just saw an infant die and now you have a child of your own at home and you're going and looking at your child and your infant's right there? Like, no, like that's really what it comes down to, right? I have a 3-year-old and I have a coming a 1-year-old. And just 2 months ago, I was called in. I went in the morning to go provide spiritual care to a Muslim family of a 1-year-old that just died. And I'm coming back home, and my wife's pregnant with our other child. And this is really what, like, this is like what, you know, the brother was saying, like Yilmaz was saying, that like it's you got the heart's got to be there. There's got to be this aptitude for it, this yearning for it, because this is not for the faint of heart. We're there for people at their lowest, and we'll have our own going on at the same time. And I think that's where the greatest gift is, though, that Allah is placing us here to be able to take care of them. So for me, it's about having a theology of compassion. Like, why are you doing this? So that the satisfaction comes back to us. And it provides us more awareness of it too. So related to that scenario that I just told you, because I've been doing this for a few years, like I actually have I wrote up a reflection that was in this this booklet, this publication called Healing the Healers. And it had to do about holding trauma and spirituality together. I talked about one of my experiences as a chaplain resident, where there was a mom who died unexpectedly during a routine procedure that the doctor was doing. Okay, so she was pregnant. It was a routine procedure, and there was just earthquakes going on within that department. And I was called there as the Muslim chaplain to provide care to the husband, who has two other kids in school, who's trying to figure out how he's going to tell them this terrible news that their mom, that they're expected to see later today, is no longer alive. Can you just imagine the tragedy and like the fissures that's going to be in the ground of this family now? And I'm there, and I have all my own feelings that I'm working through. Mostly I'm like breathing, saying that I'll attend to them in a little bit. I'm here right now doing my role, and I'll attend to them more deeply later on. But in the moment, the sadness, I'm there. I can, and if it's only this much sadness and powerlessness for me, oh my God, how much is it for them? So that's what I'm trying to work through, and I'm capturing this in the publications. What I'm saying, so and it shows how I'm trying to hold spirituality there. So I'll just tell you this briefly from an anecdote from my life. And so 3 hours later, I find myself in the chapel, or the mini musalla that's in the little prayer area that we had there, and I'm just praying to Allah. I say, and I'm crying, and I'm saying that, like, something to the effect that you know uh if I see the work that you're putting before me, and it's really giving me some uh, I'm thinking those thoughts of, like, I see the work that you've given me, and I'm now um being tasked with this. Allah, thank you for giving me this opportunity to provide care to this family. In the gratitude of saying what I was able to do, that was the formation of my theology of why I do this. Your question about motivation again is critical. If you don't have boundaries, you're not going to be able to keep doing this life-giving work. That's how they feed each other. So if you really want to do this, then you really do have to be aware of, what does boundaries look like? What does balance look like? If I were to ask anyone here, what does balance look like? Everyone's going to give a different answer. If personally speaking, you might go to this book of whatever, and they'll say, well, this is what balance looks like. But if you ask yourself that, it'll be something different. And so that's where this theology of mine happened, and the balance between our boundaries and all that is constantly in conversations with us. But the story didn't end there. So the question was, did you bring it home? I thought I didn't. 1 week passes, 2 week passes, 3 week passes, and I'm noticing my heart feel very heavy. And I'm like, oh man, I thought I left that at home. I thought I left that at work. I did all that self-care. I go in the car, I read my, salah, I read my du'as, I gave it to Allah, I gave it, all of that. And I noticed I just was feeling a loss of motivation. And I realized again that I thought I could have a lot of power over the circumstances of my self-care. I was trying to control the situation. And I got into a ball, and I cried in the bed, and my wife happened to be there. And that's when some of that just release happened. And I realized that the more I tried to control things, the more disintegrated I became, because I was numbing myself, and that's partly what was happening. And also at the same time, I needed that experience. How else can I have grown in the wisdom without these very challenging experiences? And that's what I'm saying, is that we need to be compassionate to ourselves, and also be aware. Like I and not try to overburden our families as well. That's what our colleagues are for the details. Maybe our families can just know that, oh, I had a tough day, it was really hard, or something like that. They don't need to carry those burdens because they don't have some of the experiences and the support groups that we have as chaplains. So we need to make sure we have communities like Chaplain Sakina was talking about earlier on, that's where we talk about the details with. But with our families, they're going to know that we feel something. So we got to tell them. That's how you got to bring it home. So you kind of, you identify it. It's kind of like a backpack. You're bringing, you got this backpack of all this stuff that you carried, and you're telling your family, you're telling yourself, oh, here's my backpack, I came home. Oh, that's what it is. Oh, that's the sadness that you see in my face. Yeah, it was a really hard time. That's what it is. And then you just go about your day. Your kids are there, they're going to distract you, or they're going to attract you. Really, you're another part of your soul, another part of what Allah wants you to do, to be there for your family and be there for mine. That's a long-winded answer to that question, but I hope that gives you a sense of my idea about it.
So, Chaplain, are you affirming me to my answer to Ustad honors? So it's harder than regular other jobs, other things, correct?
Yes.
Because I never have to deal with the death of the infant at the restaurant. Mostly I lost one full pizza or the one course of meal. But when I'm in the hospital, when I have to give the news, the demise of the family member or the loved one, it's much, much, much harder than this one.
Yeah, you might get maybe, because I know my dad was in the restaurant business. He got physically tired, and that was a different kind of tired, and may Allah bless him and the work he did to support our family. But it's very different spiritually, mentally, because they deal with these tragedies, or even like in the prison system. I mean, like, these people, they can't leave. You can leave, they can't. They stay, and who knows what crimes, or what mistakes they're redeeming themselves through, right? Because the thing with being in prison or jail, from my understanding, is that's their debt to society. They go there to pay their debt to society so they can come back out, and that's a real burden as well. And who knows how many of them are unjustly there too. And you're carrying all that, and maybe they'll tell you their stories as well, all that. And that's a totally different practice of what you're going to be providing them in terms of compassion, that you're trying. I can only imagine the kind of things you might be telling them in terms of, like, Allah has hope for you, God has hope for you, there's hope there, and you're telling them the stories of redemption. You're trying to help them, encourage them, and teach them, and trying to reach redemption. And it's a different experience, but it's such a burden and a responsibility, and it's different. We're tasked with the care of souls, and that's the thing that we carry around. We can go and take a bath, a nice warm bath, after a long day at the restaurant, like my dad did. Although I don't know, he took long baths. He liked to watch TV and put his feet up on the coffee table, and drink some tea at night. That's what he liked to do to relax. For me, I have to sit. I have to talk to people. I have to process things. That's my process of it. And just doing self-care, like putting my feet up, when you just have all of these like hard stories, sometimes it does enough, but we really need to, there's another quality that's there. And that's why I was talking about self-supervision, and consultation is so important for us. If we don't know we're struggling, then we can't ask for help. And with mental, spiritual, and emotional experiences, those are hidden. I guess you could say, like our back being sore is hidden too, in a way. Like, if have a long physical labor of a job, It's just that the feeling is more immediate. I think, like, your pain in the knee is there, and I think some people take medication for that. Maybe we do that emotionally as well, or spiritually. We try to numb things. I think that for me is called distractions. That's why self-supervision is so important. Is if we don't self-supervise and we don't work on those skills, we don't know when we're burning on both ends.
Thank you, brother. We have limited time. I believe 6:30 is our aim to finish our conversation and interview. So before Sister Tuba's question, I would like to give a good news our friends here. We have intention to start new CPE education course with the ACPE, if possible. We are thinking and working on it. Would you like to say something about it, Brother Jawad?
Yeah, brother Chaplain Unur and I, we were in conversations, and inshallah, and if Allah wills it, and we're gonna try to bring ACPE, CPE to folks for respect. And part of it is just about, it's a process. I'm here, but I myself can't provide the unit. We're not free agents, so we have to be attached to a group, an associate, not just ACPE, but like a center or program that offers it. So we're in conversations, and we're trying to clear this out. So we hope and pray that sometime in 2024, most likely after the month of Ramadan, sometime after the month of Ramadan, sometime in 2024, maybe immediately after, maybe sometime after that, if Allah wills it, we'll be able to do that, and bring this, and inshallah just try it out for this time. Does that sound right?
Yes, perfect. Yeah, we are trying to do our best, and we will do it, inshallah. So, Sister Tuba, are you still alive? We are.
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead and ask your question.
I remember it.
Before that, may I also ask another question as a follow-up to what Brother Jawad mentioned about self-supervision and how it is challenging sometimes what we are doing, pouring our hearts to our work. It's not like you just put it behind easily. Sometimes we think that that's what we did, but it doesn't happen. It was a really that full insight. Profound insight for me. Thank you for sharing, because the more we share, the more I understand how we look alike. We all, and as human beings, and especially nowadays, what we see on the news, the tragedies that we witness. May Allah help, all innocent lives, all those people and children who go through what they go through. And I also want to share this here as a follow-up. So my question is, I have two questions. One is, how can we take care of ourselves in this really difficult times nowadays? As a follow-up of how you share your experience, how that experience hit you hard at home. And the second thing is, and the rewarding parts of chaplaincy or being a supervisor in your own experience. We know how challenging it is, but what about the fruits of it in your life? These are two questions. I don't know if you have enough time, but if you can address them too, I would really appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you mentioning the time. So I'll be succinct. The first one, I think my practice of it is to remind myself, especially in times of suffering and imagining all the world stuff. When the Taliban came into Afghanistan back in 2021 in August, and I have family there in Herat, I was really disturbed, and I send money there regularly to support my family there. And it was really disturbing to see how powerless. It was very disturbing to see the news. It also reminded me not to watch the news as much either. I'm not there. That's the problem. I'm not there, and I'm not the government either. So that was part of it. Maybe just to check how much in a day I'm consuming, the 24-hour news cycle that is also part of the consumerism of America and the West. But I remember noticing then, as I was falling asleep, taking a nap, I was taking a nap, and I was trying to go into a nap, and all of a sudden I realized that how powerless I was feeling. Honestly, that insight into how powerless I was feeling as one human being laying on the couch while everyone is suffering over there, and even now, um, I'm like, and all these sufferings, they've never stopped. They're just ongoing, but the media cycle is really part of it, and they make things worse. There's a lot of money in capitalism in the news cycle right now. That's why there's like 24-hour news cycles in the way that they are. But there is a lot of truth, I think, to what's happening. We know what the truths are as well, but the our brains can only take in so much, and we get overloaded. There's information overload is what that's the quality of what I'm talking about. So the thing I ended up telling myself was this, and this does come from the Christian tradition a bit, but again, it's about but its true is Islamic, and it's this: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I fell asleep saying that, and I woke up realizing just that. Like, it really shifted me, because again, I do behavioral health chaplaincy. A lot of people struggle with substance abuse, and that's a regular thing that comes up. So it was already in the front of my head. One second.
He has kids, little kids. That's why sometimes, yes, go ahead, bro.
Yeah, thank you. My daughter was in the toilet, and she's like hitting the thing against it was really, really loud. I don't know if you could hear it. Anyhow, so that was one thing I tell myself. So the first thing is to identify your suffering, the stress. The second is to realize that others are suffering just like you. There's a common humanity to it. And the third is to give yourself a blessing or a prayer that's in light of them. Okay, like, may I be strong, or may I accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Is to give yourself that self-compassion. The second thing related to what I enjoy about it, like, you heard my story. I hear these stories of my like my students so regularly. There's a lot of satisfaction in seeing how they've increased in their sense of agency, empowerment, and that they don't have to continue with the same ways that they were doing things. There's a lot of satisfaction in seeing my students grow and to become successful and do things in this life that feel rewarding. So it's the witnessing of that, but based off of the impact I'm having on that. So that's the thing. The second part that I find satisfying is that I'm able to speak about things the way that I can. Like, there's a satisfaction in having language so that I can help and also ask for help too. I find I'm so thankful to God that I've been able to learn in the way that I've been able to learn. That's a satisfaction of mine. That's what I'm trying to say. So those are two things, and I get to meet really cool people. I get to meet folks like yourselves, very diverse folks from around the country. My horizons have really expanded in ways that I could never have imagined, being the son of refugees. The third thing related to the questions you originally brought up was about certified educator opportunities. Listen, it's really challenging to find them. You might be able to look online. You go to Indeed.com and you type in ACP certified educator candidate positions, and you might find some. I think there's one in Wisconsin right now. I think there's one in Long Island. There's not that many of them publicized.
There's one in Naropa also available now, Colorado.
Yeah, and that's published as well.
Yes, it's published, but there is a preference for a Buddhist candidate.
Yeah, and so we just named three, but there's so many people out there, right? And these are just three positions. Can you imagine how many people want these roles? And then there's others that are not publicized, like mine. Like, it was just through networking, and it's really hard. So I want to affirm that. the way to do it is to keep talking to folks like me and others who are interested, and it's really part of like the is it like the like the it's like the grapevine. You know, you hear about it through like that means. And I wish that there was more streamlined. It's a problem that ACPE is struggling with. We're existentially in a real struggle because we have lots and lots and lots of educators retiring and not that many people replacing them. We existentially are really worried in our association. And so we all are invested in making sure that we have more certified educator candidates so that they become educators, because there is a great retirement happening very soon, and it is happening already. And you reach out to any of us. If you meet someone, you ask them, do you know? You know, if you ask me, I just told you the ones I know. And Chaplain Sakina just mentioned one as well. And
Actually, I think the one at Tahara Center might also be available now.
yeah. So these are the ways, and you see the think, or it's the part of the networking. It's really challenging. So I just want to affirm that. So for those of folks who want to do educator training, this is just the way it is for now. The thing that some folks don't sometimes always get is that they're not publicized like they are for internships and residencies, because once a position is occupied, it's usually occupied for 3 to 5 years. Alhamdulillah, I was able to finish in 3 years and 4 months, but really 2 years and 8 months, because I started there. But when I got into the process, it really took just 2 years and 8 months, alhamdulillah. And then I was able to release that. So right now at the Cleveland Clinic, there might be some opportunity there, but it's not publicized. You just need to call the places. So I would call the places as well. Like, is there any interest there? Do you have any openings? You make some connections. Some, again, because it's a 3 to 5 year commitment, some of these places are also wanting to know the people too that they're going to be interviewing and things like that. So hopefully that gives you an understanding.
Tuba, did you get your answer? I think yes.
Yes. Thank you. It was what I realize now is there is enough opportunities out there, and they're looking for trainees, and that gives me some hope. Because when you said that we are in a crisis, I thought that there are too many people who graduated as supervisors. Then when you said that we need more, so there's this demand, and so I want to give hope to my friends who is here. And why don't they have a great vision and dream, and about future, to become a supervisor? I always was telling this in our gatherings, as chaplains to chaplains. Uh, Always dream big, and there's always how can I say, you can do everything starts with a dream and vision. So why don't you dream this? Because there are now only 3 Muslim supervisors in the United States, ACPE. Am I right? Brother.
That are active that I know of, yes.
Yeah, so there's much. I think the need is also high, right? I mean, there's so many Christians. Maybe I don't know about Jewish community, but for Muslims, there should be more. What is your response to this, brother?
No, I mean, that's why I do the work I do. And that's partly why I published the chapter I did, to give people insight into what it takes to become an educator and what the work looks like from an educator point of view in the chapter I published, and how I got connected. So I wanted folks to understand that so they can, at least in written form, get a sense of it. And secondly, when I'm working on my dissertation right now, is to try to provide some more literature through the way of my dissertation, so that Muslims coming through the process, they don't have to feel as like they don't, so they can have more literature, more things available than I did when I went through. And so I agree with you, and I want more of us in the process, and I hope to be one of the few that can, like you said, the 3 that can, that's how it all builds. It starts with 1, starts with 2, 1 starts with 3, and then all of a sudden, it just, that's how it's like a accumulation effect.
Dear sisters and brothers, we have more to talk. However, Chaplain Jawad's and my Maghrib prayers are tricky position now. We need to quit. But Sister Sekine, as a conclusion, last words, would you like to say something?
No, Barakallahu feek. I just wanted to say, yeah, keep on the journey. For some of us, it's a bit more roller coaster. Some of you who maybe even have coming from international places or something. I've been coaching a few candidates coming from international and with visa struggles and trying to do CPE and all of that with refugee status and student status. But inshallah, if your dream is there and just go step by step in the process. And even for me, like in 2021, I was accepted at Stanford to continue with my CPE educator training as a CEC candidate. But I couldn't continue because I was still on an international student visa. And then it was COVID time and I wasn't able to get the student status. And so my journey was kind of stuck for a while. And then Allah brought me to Respect and to Pennsylvania. And then now, Alhamdulillah, I can also share that I'm in the process of interviewing for a CEC position. And so I ask for your dua as well, that inshallah I can be one of the future Muslim candidates in the pipeline if once we hear from the interview results. And may Allah help Respect to continue with our CPE program in different ways and keep on growing and support our students, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum, Chaplain Jawad. You've also been a great cheerleader and mentor along my journey. So appreciate that.
Brother Jawad, last words.
No, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure to be with everyone here. And I've spoken enough. So I just wish you all well. And hope you have a good night. And may Allah's peace and blessings be upon you all.
Ameen. Let's finish with Asr. Would you like to read?
Sure. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتوصوا بالحق وتوصوا بالصبر صدق الله العلي العظيم.
لله تعالى الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
I hope we can do this again, Brother Honor, because I think time was limited and I have a bunch of more questions. I hope we can get together again, if depending on Brother Jawad's availability and your availability with
Yes.
Sister Sakina.
Still here.
Yeah. I mean, if you are next time.
Also, like,
I
brother,
really how to.
also,
Yeah.
brother has my contact information too. So if there are folks who have specific things we want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about it offline.
Yeah. Also,
Okay.
we can do one more interview, or not interview, this kind of meeting again, inshallah. Whenever we need, we can talk and arrange it. Isn't it, Brother Jawad?
Yeah, and inshallah, we can manage a little bit more. Sure.
As-salama.
As-salam.